Hello, thank you for attending the Eating Disorder Hope online conference 2, Anorexia, Hope and Healing in 2018. I am excited to introduce our next presenter, Jennene Eklund. She is the author of the book Overthrow. And this book is very inspiring. We actually have a drawing for it on Eating Disorder Hope where you can sign up to win a free copy of the book. You can also check out Jennene Eklund's website and find out how to order it. So her presentation today will be on Celebrate Recovery and how that can be applied in eating disorder, healing, and hope for sufferers, particularly anorexia. A little bit about Jennene is she serves on the national team for Celebrate Recovery as the National Women's Encourager Coach. She has been an active participant and leader in Celebrate Recovery, which is Christ-centered and a 12-step program available in over 30,000 churches worldwide since 2010. She has 4 daughters and is a passionate advocate for women, especially for those who struggle with food and body image issues in the recovery community. Jennene's first book, Overthrow, was released in 2017, and again, I encourage you to check it out. And with that, I would like to introduce Miss Jennene Eklund.
Hi there, my name is Jennene, and I'll just jump right into it. The way I would introduce myself in Celebrate Recovery is I would say, my name is Jennene. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ, and I struggle with eating disorders, and I struggle with also being a know-it-all. So Celebrate Recovery is awesome because it's not just for addiction. We all, get the vibe that 12-step programs are for drug and alcohol issues, but Celebrate Recovery is unique because it covers any hurt, habit, or hang-up. And I introduce myself first as a believer in Jesus Christ because we want to say right off the bat that Jesus Christ is our true higher power and that we identify ourselves first and foremost as a follower, as a believer of Jesus. He is our identity, but we also want to be very vulnerable and transparent that we struggle. And so you could say, I'm a believer in Jesus, I struggle with codependency. I'm a believer and I struggle with alcohol, or whatever, you fill in the blank. But for me, it's eating disorders, and my husband can testify being a know-it-all. So there you go. It's a struggle. You got to work on everything, and you discover more about yourself as every day as you get older too. So that's what I like about it, is that it's a process that makes you very self-aware, because I started with Celebrate Recovery probably about 12 years ago because I was dying of eating disorders. But as I started to work through that, and I went inpatient treatment and started to work the steps on my eating disorder, and I was starting to experience healing, I realized we describe it as peeling the onion. I'm sure you've heard that before, but there's just all kinds of layers that lead us to why we struggle the way we struggle, why we cope with life the way we cope with life. So it's a program that not only benefits me, I have 4 children, it benefits our children, they participate, and it's for people and children of all ages.
So can you tell us a little bit about how you came across Celebrate Recovery in your own life experience and what that was like?
Okay, so I came across Celebrate Recovery, I'm trying to think of how many years. It's probably been 12, 13, 14, that many years ago. My husband was a social worker for the state of Delaware, and he was getting his master's degree. He's now a licensed clinical social worker, so he does therapy. So he fixes everybody. That's who I was married to. And at the time, I had been struggling since I was a teenager with eating disorders. But the pastor of our church had a heart for the hurting and the underserved that churches don't typically are known for reaching out to. So he knew that my husband was a guy who had a passion for helping, people who were in distress. So he gave him the kit, the startup kit, and said, hey, you'd be a great person to run it. So that is truly, I wish it could be more of a spiritual aha awakening moment, but it truly was. Handed the kit and been like, okay, we'll do this, sure. So that was my introduction to Celebrate Recovery. And I will say, and I was just in Washington, D.C. this past weekend at a Celebrate Recovery one-day training conference. And these are conferences that are held all over the United States. About every 2 weeks. I was just in one in Atlanta and in Seattle the weekend before. I'm going to be in New Orleans and in Lansing, Michigan in the upcoming weeks. But so I get to meet a lot of really cool people. But these people knew me. I had run into some people who had known me from when my husband had been handed the kit and started Celebrate Recovery. And I was not a happy participant in Celebrate Recovery when it started. I went very, very begrudgingly because I felt like I had to. I didn't want to be there. I felt like I didn't want anyone to know what I was struggling with because it was embarrassing. It was shameful. I was a pastor's wife. I was the mother of 4 daughters. I should know better than to be in my 30s and to still be struggling with eating disorders. So I didn't want to go, but I went because he was running the thing. So my introduction to Celebrate Recovery was one where I was I didn't want to be there. So I would say hostile attitude is a good word to describe it. I was there, I was present, but I was not engaging in the program. It wasn't until after I went to treatment at Bermuda in 2009, and I came back and I did relapse and I struggled some, but there was this awakening that started inside of me where I wanted to get better, right? You can relate to that. When that longing awakens within you and you say, there's more to life than what I'm living now, and I will do anything to get it. So for me, engaging in the process of Celebrate Recovery and working a 12-step program was the way I went about it because it was completely free. It was available, like I said, in 30,000 churches, so there's good chance there's a program near you. And I just went after it. I joined a step study. I started leading open share groups. I started leading worship. I started teaching. Anything and everything that I could do to engage in the process. I did my inventory. I worked the steps relentlessly. And the crazy thing is that it just day by day by day, not only did my struggle with eating disorders change, but my attitude about Celebrate Recovery changed. And I fell in love with the program because I get a front seat to see change lives every day. And I kid you not, every single day. Yes, there are a lot of struggles, but I'm telling you, if you want to have a front seat to see transformation, then I invite you to Celebrate Recovery because you're going to see it. I guarantee it.
So can you tell us how a Celebrate Recovery meeting works, how somebody finds it and what happens? I know there's often a lot of intimidation and reticence to go because we don't know what to expect or how to interact or behave.
Yeah, I mean, it's the classic. I mean, if you've ever tried to go to an AA or an NA meeting, there's that classic sit out in the parking lot while the first meeting's going on, and then the next week you come in and sit in the back. I mean, it's a process. These are decisions followed up by processes, and that's what Celebrate Recovery is. But how Celebrate Recovery works is that you could go to celebraterecovery.com and we have what's called a group finder. So you put in where you live or a zip code, and it'll direct you to the closest Celebrate Recovery to you, to the church in which it meets. And so say you show up. What you can expect, because this is true of every single Celebrate Recovery, in order for it to be called Celebrate Recovery, it has to adhere to those certain DNA points. And that would be that when you go in, there's what we call a large group meeting, which is kind of, I want to call it like a church service. Not really, it's like church for honest people. That's what we call it in Celebrate Recovery. But you're going to have worship, you're going to have music, you're going to have either a testimony or teaching. And then after that, we split up into issue-specific and gender-specific groups called open share groups. And so you go, and I lead one called Women's Body Image, but we have chemical dependency, codependency, survivors of sexual abuse, what have you. It just depends on how many people you have at that group and what their experience is. We split up into those groups, and then you go and we take turns sharing. It's very confidential. We have 5 guidelines that the open share time has to adhere to. And first and foremost is confidentiality. If confidentiality doesn't exist, then there's nothing. And I guarantee you we guard it fiercely. What you share stays there. And if it doesn't, you're in big trouble. And let me tell you, I have really never experienced anybody breaking confidentiality because most people they respect that because they want that return to them. So confidentiality is a big part. So you share and you start building relationships. And then we have what's called a step study, which is something that meets on a different night of the week where you actually work through the 12 steps. Now, these are gender-specific groups, but they're not issue-specific groups. So when I did my step studies, I'm with women who struggle with all different kinds of things. Usually, I'm the only person in the step study that struggles with food issues or eating disorders. Sadly, I have yet to meet a woman who doesn't have a hang-up about her body or how she feels about food, because this culture is ridiculous and it beats us down constantly. I have yet to meet a woman of any age, of any struggle, that doesn't have that struggle. But usually I'm the only one that has an eating disorder. But the beautiful thing is that we're all just coping with life. Yeah, I cope with life with eating disorders. I mean, you have people with all different kinds of problems, all different levels of mental illness, disabilities, I mean, levels of education, you know, like some are on welfare, some are extremely, you know, affluent. They all are together because we're all just people and we're all looking for the one power that can restore us, and that's Jesus Christ. And as we work through those steps, the steps are designed to really examine self-examination and to give us tools in order to, I mean, I use the tools that I learned in the step study daily in my eating disorder recovery. I also use tools I learned while I was in treatment, but the steps and what I learned in Celebrate Recovery truly does see me through the day-to-day of my recovery. So that's what that looks like in a nutshell. We have a program for kids. So if you have kids, it's called Celebration Place. Bring your kids. It's like recovery, we call it pre-covery. So our goal is to put recoveries out of business, because the kids are going to learn how to deal with life, and they're going to have really good, healthy coping skills, and they're not going to do the stuff that we did. They're going to know how to handle themselves. That's our goal. So there's a place for kids to be. There's a place for teenagers to be. I have three, yes, three, pray for me, teenage daughters. And they have a place to go because it's modified, but it's basically the same thing. They're learning about denial. They're learning about powerlessness, but in ways that they can understand. And it's also a very confidential environment for them too.
Wow, I did not even realize there was the kid component. That is fabulous, because so many people either cannot afford or obtain the childcare. And then there's so many kids these days that have anxiety and PTSD and addiction issues. And this is free. It's just such a huge blessing to the community.
Yes, and what I see happen all the time is that the kids are the ones that are bringing the parents, if you will. The kids love it. And so they're like, Mom, we can't miss it. So when I would have wanted to stay home from a meeting, my kid, I go. And so it's like this beautiful relationship where we're learning the same things. I've had the coolest conversations with my kids about denial and powerlessness and inventory and all that kind of stuff in the car on the way home, because we're all at our hearts, whether they're dealing with it at school, on Instagram or Twitter, whatever it is, whatever they're dealing with. At the heart of it, it's the same tools that we're going to need that are going to help us deal with that. So I will say, not every group necessarily, I cannot guarantee you they have Celebration Place, because we're talking about in 30,000 churches. Like my Celebrate Recovery group, we have about 300 adults that come. So we have a really big, thriving kids program too. But sometimes your group has like 6 people, and that's great. That's okay. But sometimes the resources and the churches, that's why I love Celebrate Recovery, because it's ecumenical. It's not just, okay, we're just this one denomination. It's whatever church wants to host a Celebrate Recovery, wants to partner with it, wants to have it there, they can have it. So we're not dictating to people what they're supposed to believe. It truly is a come as you are to the environment that it's very local, it's very community-based as well.
And so the best place to go to find a meeting would be the Celebrate Recovery website. And I think you've told me before that there's a directory where people can go by state. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, and it's constantly being updated because we're constantly adding groups. So you just go to celebraterecovery.com and it's just called Group Finder, Group Locator. and it just guides you through the process. Or another really great resource is that we have hundreds and hundreds of state representatives. So I'm trying to think of how many would be. Like, I live in North Carolina, so say there's 10 different people who are, they're volunteers, but they take care of a certain part of North Carolina geographically. So their information is on the website. So if you go, you know, I live in Vermont, here's so-and-so, they're the state rep for Vermont, here's their contact information. I can shoot them an email, I can call them, and they're gonna contact me back, and they're gonna walk me through the process or help me find a group or whatever. They're a resource that's completely free. And they're people who have been through the programs themselves. They're not necessarily eating disorder people, they're just people. And a lot of times they've been through a lot. And that's what I love about Celebrate Recovery, is the diversity that I find there. Because for me, I needed to see, like, my best friends in Celebrate Recovery are like 10, 20 years older than me. It's so inspiring to be around people from all walks of life. There's never, I've never arrived in my recovery. I love learning new things. So it's just exciting. There's just this vibrancy about it. I mean, like I said, I travel all the time to different conferences. We have 2 national summits in July in Nashville, and then in August at Saddleback Church in Lake Forest, California, which have 3,000 people at each one. And when you get into an environment where there's 3,000 people who have been in the depths, and Jesus Christ has resurrected them literally out of the grave, I'm telling you, that's a place you want to be. That's a place you want to be. You want to I love to just go and just to soak in the environment, because changed people change people, right? Freed up people, free people. It's this cycle, this beautiful cycle that when you've experienced hope, you can't help but give it away. And that's what Celebrate Recovery does. It equips you not only to experience healing from your own struggle, but also then it turns you into a leader. It turns you into a mentor. It turns you into somebody who's discipling other people. It's just this beautiful process. And that's what I love so much about it.
So thank you. That's a great overview. So if an individual particularly struggling with anorexia goes, will they have literature available that they can apply to the work they're already doing with the treatment team? How can they build that into any of the treatment they're already getting as a resource?
Well, I can speak to this from personal experience, because I was in Celebrate Recovery, and as I was working my program, I realized that I needed more help than I could get at Celebrate Recovery, at a 12-step program. So I went into inpatient treatment. And when I came back, what was so great was I had all these tools that were very specific, and all this information and education and all the stuff you learn in treatment. And I was in a little bit healthier place. So I was able to engage the process of Celebrate Recovery using my own tools. So when I talk about, one of the big expressions in Celebrate Recovery is this: one day at a time. So for me, it was one meal at a time, one snack at a time. We're supposed to do a searching and fearless moral inventory, daily inventories. It's examining yourself to find triggers, to find relationships that are toxic, to find the things that set you off, and to realign your life and build your life around your goals, which is to recover. And Celebrate Recovery, the process works if you work it. So no, Celebrate Recovery is not specifically tailored to eating disorders, but it is the most beautiful, natural fit for you to use the information. And it just strengthened my ability to recover, because not only was I had this community around me. And I'm telling you, the most exciting thing that happened to me was when I finished my 12-step after treatment, and I was able to write my testimony and share it. And in that moment, when you realize that your pain and your struggle has been recycled in the most beautiful, redemptive way, and that other people, when you look in their eyes and you can see that they're in that dark place that you used to be, and you have hope that you can offer them, there's nothing like it. You will never go back. I will never be the same. I could have never imagined, when I walked through the doors of Bermuda Ranch, the most angry, hostile, rebellious mother of 4 in her 30s that didn't want to be there because I was so much older than everybody else. It was embarrassing. It was humiliating. I had lost My husband said if I didn't do it, our marriage was over, that I wasn't going to be able to be around the kids anymore. I had everything. I was about to lose everything. I could have never imagined that today I would be talking to you, Jacqueline, and to all of you and telling you that change is possible. It doesn't matter if you've struggled for 20 years, for 40 years, or for 2 months, or however long it's been, or however deep your struggle has gone, or how many times you've been in treatment. You can change. We can recover. There is hope.
Oh, that is so uplifting to hear. I think a lot of the people that will be watching this and interested in attending might be in other countries or expatriates. How diversified are we, say, in Australia, Canada, that sort of thing?
Yeah, there are Celebrate Recovery groups in Australia and Canada. I know for sure. There's not nearly as many, so I don't live there. But we have an international director for Celebrate Recovery, and his information is on the website. So if you're in one of those places, another country, you can connect with him and he can give you the details about how that works, because we have this whole other arm that works exclusively internationally. I mean, I don't know what the count of languages is, but the material has been translated into multiple languages. So it's definitely something that if you are living somewhere else, should definitely look into it.
Is the 12 steps, are the 12 steps the same as they are in regular 12-step programs, other than identifying the higher power as Jesus Christ?
Well, you know what? I've never done AA, but I know that the 8 principles, which are what the 12 steps are based on, they're based on the Beatitudes, the actual words of Jesus Christ. And if I had been thinking, I would have my book with me and I could read them to you, but they are very, very similar. I mean, the first is, that we realize that we are powerless. That's the first step. I mean, and that's denial. That's the first step. So I think they're very, very similar. They use scripture as a big part of it. So it's and the questions that they ask are definitely more faith-based, but I know a lot of people do both AA or OA or NA and do Celebrate Recovery, and it's very similar. I mean, the founder of Celebrate Recovery came out of AA, and that's where he got his freedom. He found it there, and he had a sponsor there. He just wanted to bring the freedom that he found in AA and completely center it on Jesus Christ as being the higher power.
Understandable. And our treatment centers, do you know if any of the treatment centers in the U.S. are offering this as an option for addiction and eating disorder sufferers?
I don't know that. I do know when I was in Bermuda that Celebrate Recovery was listed in the back as like potential resources for you when we returned, when we were back at home. Yeah. I don't know that. That would be that's a deep desire of my heart, is to be able to, because I've experienced, you name it with an eating disorder, I've experienced it. And this is a free program that can marry so beautifully for aftercare after you've been in inpatient treatment. It's just the perfect fit. So I would love to have that conversation. I would love to have that conversation.
Yeah, I think that really does need to occur, because I know years ago when I went to treatment, years ago, they would take us to OA meetings. And even on my own, I would go, I didn't struggle with addiction, just an eating disorder, but I would go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and I could identify, because it was a food body image issue, just replacing the drug to escape my feelings and powerlessness in life and all of that. And I hear a lot of talk about people having the option or even being mandatory to go to some OA or AA meetings while they're in treatment. And it would be nice if more treatment centers also offered a Celebrate Recovery option. They do offer Christian tracks at many of the treatment programs.
Yeah, definitely. It's something that makes sense. And like I said, it's completely free. And that's a big thing for me. Is just what I hear you say, and I hear this a lot, is what people are drawn to and what they're looking for is honesty. They're looking for a place to be real. And you can find that in AA, you can find it in NA, you can find it in Celebrate Recovery. And that's the first step to healing, is when you're finally able to get brutally 100% honest. Because we say in Celebrate Recovery, you can't heal a wound by saying it's not there. You can't heal something if you're not going to acknowledge it. And that's why these 12-step programs are beautiful fits for aftercare, because they're a place where you can take all the stuff that, I mean, I've been to more therapists. I could write a phone book of the therapists I've been to. But I learned each one, I learned something different, you know, and so you take what you learn and you're uncovering with your therapist and you're processing it in a safe environment, but ultimately in an environment where it's not up to me. I have a power that's greater than me. And if there's anything that I'm just going to say this right now. I'm not an expert on 12-step programs. I'm not an expert on eating disorders, but I am an expert in hope. And that's what I can offer to the people listening to this conference. I have a lot of experience and I am passionate about Celebrate Recovery, but I'm passionate about bringing a message of hope, because I know when I was struggling, I felt hopeless. And every decision that we make to recover, whether or not it's to take that meal plan that our nutritionist gives us and to implement it, when I wake up in the morning and I have that plan in my hand and I'm making the decision, am I going to do this or not? It's a decision rooted in hope that if I do this, I'm going to get better, that things can change. Without hope, none of this works. And that's why I'm so very passionate, because I'm older. I'm in a different place in life than a lot of people that struggle with eating disorders. I know what it feels like to feel ashamed and to feel like you're screwing your kids up forever and ever. I have 4 daughters. I understand what this culture is doing, but I also want to say, despite all of that, that you can recover. Change is possible. And that's why I wrote the book. I was getting emails after emails from people because there's not a lot of Christ-centered resources about struggling with food and body image. I experienced that. The resources that I was given were ultimately, even if they had a lot of good stuff in them, ultimately the goal was to lose weight, right? Because that's the working assumption, is that if you can just get healthy, and healthy is code for losing weight, we all know that, right? If we can just get healthy and lose weight, take care of our bodies, be pleasing to God, that entails losing weight. And that didn't help me. That wasn't helpful. Even when I did gain weight, and maybe I did need to lose a few pounds, it wasn't helpful, because that's not what this is about. It's not about food. It's not about my body, not even a little bit. So that's why I wanted to write it down, because I wanted to be able to hand somebody something and say, here you go. This is my story. And it's got tools in it that I wished, ways of thinking about food and my body that I wished I had known 25 years ago. And that was really why I wrote the book. It kind of took on a life of its own. And it's so exciting because I've gotten a chance to travel. And in the conference in DC, the book sold out by lunchtime, because people are hungry. There is a hunger out there for more than just, okay, get control of your food, whatever that looks like. And in my case, in anorexia, getting control of my food was what was killing me, right? So there's got to be more than just how you manipulate food. It's not about food. I wanted to write a book about food and body image that did not talk about food at all, because it's not about food. I had to a little bit because we have to eat, and it is part of it. And that is worthy of acknowledgement. But it's so exciting at these conferences to see women. And one of my dearest friends is a guy named Jeff Stoltz. I'll give him a shout out. He runs the Celebrate Recovery, a ministry called Broken Chains, which is a motorcycle. He's a biker. I wish I had a picture. There are no 2 people more different than me and Jeff Stoltz. But he started to cry when he was talking about his stepdaughter, read the book and said, this book has changed my life, because I was the kid put on a diet when I was 13. I was the person, not her necessarily, I was the person that had gastric bypass. I was the person that has spent my whole entire life thinking if I could just have my body look the way I want it to look, then I will be happy. But that's just not the way it works. And the truth is, you can be happy no matter what your body looks like, no matter what you weigh, no matter what your body can or cannot do. Because I know I have many dear friends who are disabled, and when they hear this nonsense about, you know, your body is a temple and you need it to be fit so you can go and do all these things, they're like, my body is never going to work right. It's just not. So where does that leave me? And I think that's a huge part that the eating disorder community can speak to, is people whose bodies have somehow left them behind. Because when I was recovering, I felt like my body betrayed me. My body was a traitor, because I wanted it to be a certain way and it just wasn't. And the harder I tried to make it a certain way, the more miserable I was. And I felt like then when I was made to gain weight, I had this body, I didn't want no part of it. I hated it. So for me, and the goal is always, right, we're supposed to love our bodies. I'm like, I don't love my body. I hate my body. Where does that leave me? Ultimately today, I appreciate my body. And one of my favorite things to say is that I love my muffin top. When I put on my jeans and I got my little muffin top going on, I love it. You know why? Because it proves to me that change is possible. It proves that you can put on jeans and your little squish comes out the top, and you can walk out that house, girl, and you can rock it and you can be happy and then not give it another thought. So I'm telling you, I love the jiggle in my arms. I love those things, but at the time I did not. So you have to find a place where your mindset changes and you can make sense of that. And that's really what the book is about. It's trying to find that place, because I'm not going to write, this isn't a manual on how to recover from an eating disorder, because there are a lot of much smarter people than me who could tell you that. But I can tell you what it feels like to fight that battle every day in your mind and then to ultimately be victorious.
It's an excellent book. I really recommend it. Again, in the right rail, you have the link to Jennene's blog, which I encourage you to follow. It's excellent. Also to Celebrate Recovery, if you're interested in checking that out more, and a link to enter the drawing to win a copy of Jennene's book. Thank you so much for your time. I'm very inspired, and I'm sure everyone else is too.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, Jacqueline. It's been a delight to be able to be here, and I hope that if you have any questions, that we'll provide a link to my email or to something, and maybe we can keep the conversation going.